Hello everyone, my name is Chase. This video is going to serve as a tech demo for one of my projects, Goldcrest Defense, which is a top-down, three-dimensional tower defense game with a controllable player. This is a project I worked on in my undergrad at Cal Poly with a few other collaborators. After the course, I spent some more time on the project, cleaning it up, doing some balance changes, some code fixes and such. But yeah, let's just jump right into it. So, upon opening the game, you'll be thrown into a tutorial of sorts. This just shows how to use your player, how to build towers, how to upgrade towers, and sort of some of the lore of Goldcrest Defense. So you can see some of these dialogue prompts are talking about an enemy commander who has Exosius crystals to take over the whole region. So your goal is to build towers and rush the defense of Goldcrest, as you are a builder of sorts from your own village. In this tutorial stage, you're given some crystals, and it's sort of just an open sandbox to mess around with things. You can see when you have the buy menu open, it shows a holographic view of the tower you have selected, and this is just me demonstrating that you can open the menu directly to any of the four towers. So there's the Archer, Mage, Mortar, and Crystal Factory, which you can build using 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tab is open and close the buy menu. So you can either press tab and then 1, 2, 3, 4, or just press 1, 2, 3, 4. Here I'm upgrading a couple towers just using the buttons in the buy menu. You can see in each menu it shows the current stats and what the stats upgrade to. And then at level 3 of each tower, other than the Crystal Factory, there's 2 upgrade paths. And sort of for each tower, that's either going to be a single damage, high damage, or a multi lower damage trade-off. For the mortar tower, there's also a crosshair which you can use to direct the mortar to wherever you need to go, and you can change it on the fly at any point. And then again, using right click, you can switch your view between close to your player or the overview of the whole map. And once you feel ready to go, you can move to the north tower or the north gate and start the game. So when you jump in, you have 250 credits or crystals. That's enough to get 1 mage tower, 1 archer tower. There's a myriad of options you can do here. I opted to just build the mage tower. I like to have I like to place mage towers at the corners, and so my strategy is to save up for 2 mage towers at the beginning and get those 2 slots filled in, which I've done so here. You can see that essentially there are 3 tracks of waypoints, and when each enemy spawns, they are randomly assigned to a track, just so that they aren't all clumped together. There's also, I think, 3 or 4 different types of enemies. So you'll see there's some tanks, some regular soldiers, later there'll be some archers, and then there's also like a wizard or a healer. The other UI elements here are top right. It shows what phase you're in, the wave, and the number of enemies. You can kind of hover over it to see it better. And so it'll change color, and it'll show the number of enemies when you go to attack phase. Then we have a skip button that lets you skip the buy phase, and also a speed button that lets you speed up the game if you like, which is very useful later game because the rounds start getting pretty long. In the top left, we have the number of crystals in your health. The health is just if they reach the Goldcrest main tower at the end, which is where all your main crystals are stored. In the bottom left, there's 3 grayed out like stones, and these are going to be abilities you unlock later on in the game. Here we have a random event, so essentially I think on any given buy phase, there's a random chance that a chest will spawn on a random open tile. it can either be crystals or health. In this case it was crystals. I think it's if your health is at a certain percentage, like 80% or lower, the chest will contain health. And that's sort of your main way of regaining health throughout the game. On this wave, you can see that we have the next tier of enemy coming in. So we have the purple, which is the lowest tier, and then blue. And it's like a few got by. One of the other students in my group was in charge of building the waves. That was kind of his main task. So I believe on each wave, he has an algorithm that determines what percentage of each tier it is. So purple, blue, and then I think there's like yellow, orange, and red. And it kind of gradually moves the percentage towards the next tier. Around wave 15 is kind of the transition point. His algorithm also determines the composition of the wave. I believe he had custom segments. So like archers with soldiers or soldiers with mages. And it randomized the percentage of each segment per wave. Something like that. Each entity has its own properties. So, for the tanks, they have different health points, different speeds, movement speeds, attack damage, and then I think each tier has its own amount of crystals that each enemy drops. And so as the enemies get harder, they drop more and more money. And there is some randomness to this game. So, if you don't get enough chests early game, or if maybe you get a bunch of hard blue guys earlier on, this strategy, you kind of have to adapt with what you get. Our goal with this game was to, emulate some other tower defense games that we're used to, like Bloons Tower Defense, where you have several different options of towers and different strategies. So, maybe you only go for multi-damage towers like the Mage and the Mortar, or maybe you focus on Crystal Factories early to get your resources up, which you risk taking more damage. In this playthrough, that's what I opted for. You can see I'm definitely hurting as all these blue enemies are getting by. So during these intermediate stages, I'd like to highlight some changes that we were considering making, things that didn't make the cut, and things that I am potentially going to add to the game as I work on it on my spare time now. One of the main ones is being updates to the player. We really like the idea of focusing on the controllable character. That's kind of our defining original input to the tower defense genre. Obviously, other tower defense games, you can kind of just drag in whatever towers and place them anywhere, but we decided to really force the player to use your controllable wizard to place towers and upgrade towers, and kind of make that part of the challenge. And so with that, we kind of wanted to add maybe like a manual attack. Maybe a traveling trader would show up randomly, or every few rounds, and you could like upgrade a little sword. And so early game, maybe that'd be useful. You could save up for Crystal Factories and then just kind of really focus on doing manual attacks. Or maybe you could increase movement speed, things like that. And even maybe upgrade your crystals as you unlock them. Maybe you can upgrade them to be more potent or have lower cooldown times. Another thing I really wanted to do was some other basic functionality like selling towers. Like right now you can't sell towers. And I think, especially once you hit orange and reds, which are the last two stages of enemies, they sort of take less damage from the multi-target mage towers. And I found that the single mage towers are a lot more effective against those enemies, so it could be cool to sell those and buy back towers for different strategy later game. So here we are on wave 15. You can see my little character freaking out as I prepare for the first boss. And here we have Urgoth. You can see he has his own health bar, his own character with some animations, and yeah, there you go. He has a little animation, and his ability is within his ring, he increases the movement speed of nearby enemies, and he'll do this periodically. If he reaches your tower, or the crystal tower at the very end, he will do a lot of damage repeatedly. The basic goons will just kind of do their damage and disappear, but the bosses will continue to do damage until you're dead. The bosses were something I spent a lot of time on. My main responsibilities were project manager, but also for the code, I worked on the bosses. So I did all the animation transitions. I found the boss geometry. I even did some artwork on them. So I worked to modify each boss to make them look different. And then I also added the particle effects and all the little tiny little details. So you can see in this playthrough, I actually ended up losing to the first boss. And I think that's because of investing in the crystal factories too early. And so I kind of just wanted to highlight this to show that different strategies do have a difference. So I'm kind of just going to speed through this early game here, but you'll see that in this playthrough I focus on mortar towers instead of archer towers. And I do want to note that Cal Poly was on quarter system when I took this course. And so pretty much this entire game was built in about 8 weeks or so. Okay, so jumping straight back to the boss phase again, see if this time it's any different. But you can see on this try, I was able to defeat this first boss. This is also something I worked on, sort of the game state changes. So here we have the biophase paused, and this little animation that brings up this crystal that I all did by hand, and little dialogue menu, and then the crystal goes into your inventory. So I did a lot of the coding on that whole game state flow, so your character obtaining an ability, the cooldowns, the animation, little particle effects that go out, and yeah, all of that stuff. So here, I opt to use my ability on the Crystal Factory. Essentially, a physics sphere expands out at the same radius as that particle effect, and any towers that it hits, it either detects the towers or just the tiles nearby, because we had a huge tile system. That was one of the main frameworks of our game. It found the tower on each tile within that radius, and then it sends whatever ability to that tower. Each tower had its own method for what would happen for each ability. And so the Crystal Factory also has this method which increases its rate. And I found, especially if you have enough towers to keep that bottleneck at the beginning, it's way more useful on your Crystal Factories to just boost those and get a bunch of money early game. You'll see in this playthrough that I try to gun straight for the passive Crystal Factories, which means I don't have to walk over the crystals to gain them, and I can focus my efforts on the bottleneck again. Also, you can see there's some green enemies that are definitely tanking a lot more of the damage, and I'm going to have to start focusing on towers again soon. We definitely found out quickly that balancing is one of the hardest things you can do, especially if you don't have like a formal guiding principle or formula. We're kind of just all figuring it out as we went. The game did end up being pretty difficult. A lot of our playtesters said that the game was almost impossible to completely beat, which was somewhat on purpose. We wanted to make sure that you had to have good resource management and use your abilities to win the game. But on a second try, I would definitely work harder on balancing everything. Another one of the major changes that was on my to-do list was adding new ways to regain health. Right now it's only through chests, which spawn randomly, so health management is very random. But we wanted to add to that Wandering Trader a way to buy back health, or maybe even on flawless waves you would regain a certain percentage of your health back. You can see the mortar strategy has been working out pretty well. I've been able to get 3 passive crystal factories, and I can start working on my splash damage again. Okay, so we're off to the next boss battle at wave 30. It's going to unlock our next ability. Here he is, Bugok. Sniper Tower has locked onto him, and he's taking heavy damage. You can see his ability is all towers within his range are slowed. And that's indicated by the blue particle effects. The fire rate of all those towers has been halved, I believe. You'll notice that bottlenecking all of our splash damage towards this bottleneck is pretty strong, and provides for limited strategies, in my opinion, at least early game. Something we workshopped was adding multiple entrance points, or maybe having an event that collapses one of the entrances and then a new entrance is introduced, and you kind of have to adapt on the fly for a new layout. Since we defeated the second boss, we unlocked the Crystal of Slowness. Using E, we can slow nearby enemies by half their movement speed, and this is going to be a very important ability mid to late game. One of the advantages we had in this project was the use of this tower defense pack by Tarbo Studios, which will be linked in the description. And also the Battle Wizard Poly Art asset by Dungeon Mason. These are a huge help to our project. Obviously, they helped us maintain a consistent theme, and we didn't have to go looking around for a bunch of models throughout the process. We did have to do all of the logic, so all of the projectiles, the animations, the sound design, that was all done by us. For example, the archers on the archer towers, we added those in. We did all the logic for changing their positioning as they look at the enemy that they're targeting, the arrows themselves, and the logic of dealing damage to the enemy, of course. The mortar projectiles and their splash damage. I also did a lot of work on individualizing the bosses, so I updated their color palette to match their attack. So the first boss is kind of a speed and red themed boss. I also did all of the particle effects for the bosses and their state changes, so going from walking to using their ability to attacking the tower if they get that far, or death state. Audio was one of the other big challenges. I didn't realize how difficult it would be to find sounds that make sense and don't take you out of the game, that all match the same theme, and also just how audio systems work on the back end. Our sound design was done very naively. Later game, you'll see that the audio overlaps a lot, and even like the background music will get cut out from the sound of the mortar blasts. But since working on this project, I've found better methods for audio systems. At wave 45, we got our third boss out of 4. Kufoto, however you want to say it, the green wizard. His ability is he takes money away from you periodically. So, you know, it just makes it really hard to build towers on the fly. And he just has a lot of health too. I think he has a lot more hit points than most of the other bosses. This was a boss we talked about buffing a number of times. You can also see we're moving on to the orange enemies, which are surviving a lot more of the damage than the yellows. Okay, so we unlock the Crystal of Wealth, which boosts resource drops by 2 times while effective. I think we have a player inventory script that just every time crystals are added, it's just multiplied by your resource factor. And so this counts for, I think, crystal factories and deaths of enemies. That all gets doubled. So you'll see here I usually get a 2x on top left, and then it has the Crystal of Wealth has the highest downtime. You can see another problem here is that the upgrade menu kind of blocks the lower right. Through this playthrough, I forgot that if you switch to the close, or like the quote-unquote first-person view, like the zoomed-in view, I think you can bypass this problem, but it's definitely not ideal. I think there's also a version of this game that didn't get published, where I made each of the upgrade menus. Each menu had its own theme. So like Archer Tower, Mortar, Mage, they all had different themes, just kind of spice it up. Another thing we talked about fixing is, like, once you have a bunch of towers, you kind of can't see where your character is. Perhaps we just use a shader that just shows the character when he's behind towers. That could work. Also notice that I've started to place extra crystal factories because the red enemies are very, very difficult. They have a ton of health. And even with these max towers, I'm having a hard time stopping them. And this is where I start building like a bunch of the single target Inferno towers. Or Mage towers. Don't sue me, Clash of Clans, please. Okay, you'll see here that the same problem here happens. I guess I accidentally placed the mortar targets behind the buy menu, so those lower mortars towards the end are now facing away, and I cannot fix them because I forgot about the zoom method. Zooming in to see the stuff down there. You'll see that I actually ended up losing this playthrough. But being a strong-willed individual, I quickly booted the game right back up and went straight to Hong's mode, which is the mode for my professor at the time, so that he could see through all of the functionality of all the projects that were submitted, even if he wasn't good enough to play through it naturally, or if the game was too difficult to play through naturally. So I'm just going to skip straight to Wave 60 here. this is where the final boss, Exoct, comes in. This is my favorite boss. This is one of my favorite parts to work on in the project. And this is the boss in the opening dialogue that we have been sent to defeat. He is the mastermind behind this invasion. His ability is really cool. He finds nearby towers and disables them for a certain amount of time. Makes me kind of mad that we made this game so hard because a lot of the playtesters weren't able to actually see the ability of this boss. But yeah, that's the game. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave any comments, any suggestions below. This is one of my first projects that I ever built. Definitely my first game that I built from front to back. And I'm looking forward to making new things. Thanks.